Meet the Lot, native token of Lukki Exchange and the most potential tool for investing this year. Trade now on P2B, B2B and Lukki.io.
He's also the general partner of Multicoin Capital and a limited partner at Newton Partners. He's a board member of the Bitcoin Foundation. Previously, he was co-founder and CEO of Gift, which was acquired by First Data, and he became the SVP of Product Development at First Data. And he's going to be interviewed today by Robert Beadles, also known on YouTube as Crypto Beadles. He's the CEO of Splash Factory Blockchain Development, co-founder of the Monarch token, and he is, please tune into his YouTube channel for his hard-hitting interviews. He's going to be leading our panel today.
What is going on, crypto family? So hey, it's great to be here. Big thanks to Ivan over there and to Marina and to Ross setting all this up. Good stuff. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about, I guess it's transformation of the world economy, right? Using blockchain and crypto. So I guess to kind of start it off, what is it going to take to transform the world economy using crypto and blockchain?
Time.
Time.
That's it. A little bit of time.
So
I think the industry tends to be impatient about how long it takes to adopt technology and get it into society and culture and enterprise and governments. But if we take the long-term view that this is the future of how it plays out, time is the only thing that's against us. And our perception of time, I guess.
yeah. What about like the technology and the people, that need the time to build it? So what about those guys?
They need time. What about them?
Time. All right, cool. What do you think like the biggest opportunities in blockchain and crypto for the world economy would be? Like what do you see like the big opportunities there?
Look, I think it's very clear that a more stable money supply is something the world wants. If you look at what's happening in Venezuela, India, the rest of the world, money is a big topic right now. It's probably the biggest issue, I think, worldwide around the biggest problem that crypto can actually help solve. So if we can help solve what is money, I think we can help the world function better. That said, we've also got the mistakes that governments have made for years of printing more money. We kind of did that in the crypto industry last year, and we went from a handful of tokens to 5,000 plus, and each token is essentially a form of money. So we've created inflation for ourselves over the past year, and I think we're just going to learn quickly and adapt to it, and eventually catch up with the way the world should be, I think.
Very cool. So it's great to interview you because you're one of the dragons, one of the Shark Tanks. You're an investor. You built businesses, you sold businesses. You're the CEO of Civic. So obviously you've got an eye for talent and things like that. What projects out there right now do you see that kind of maybe address some of those solutions that maybe are starting or that that are out there that people should be paying attention to?
Look, it's a very broad question. There are a ton of projects out there. I think we're still very much in the infrastructure phase of crypto. We're building the infrastructural components for what the future could look like. We have a lot of issues to solve. We've got to solve scaling, we've got interoperability, adoption. These are real problems which aren't going to be solved in 3 months or 6 months with a white paper. It takes years of coding, experience, and a lot of failure. And I think once we get through that, we're going to be in a good place. But I just think that the patience and time thing is something I keep trying to draw into people's heads, and it just takes time, and we have to keep our eyes on the sort of ecosystem and support the projects we think have a chance. Even if they do fail, they learn from it. I mean, even Ethereum right now is failing to some degree at scale, but if we had worried about that in the beginning and the guy said, look, we can't scale, let's not start it, we wouldn't have ICOs of today, we wouldn't have ERC20 tokens, you wouldn't have non-fungible tokens. So a lot of innovation, sometimes even if the path is kind of obscured, leads to other mushroom sort of effects elsewhere and second order effects within crypto. And so I think we should be encouraging projects that actually are pushing the boundaries of what's possible, knowing that when they hit a wall, and Ethereum may hit a wall on scaling soon, already has to some extent, I'm sure they'll figure it out. I'm sure they'll get past it. It may take time, but if they don't, someone else will, and that may be just from the learnings of the failures in other parts of the ecosystem.
And what do you think about what's really driving the growth behind all this blockchain? I mean, we saw there was a big influx of people that came in 2017. We see that it's kind of died off right now. What do you think's going on in the actual just crypto space right now?
Well, we're in a phase of consolidation, and it's a bear market. Whether it's crypto winter yet, I don't think I'd call it winter. I think it's more like crypto fall, autumn. Winter gets a little bit cold in the way it is right now. It's still pretty warm out there. if the Bitcoin price drops to the 3,000 level, which some people believe may happen, I think that's a bit of a crypto winter. So then you wouldn't see spring or summer until 2020. But at the current levels, we probably have another 6 to 12 months of bear market behavior. But if it gets worse, then the winter goes on longer. Like I tell people, the bigger the party, the bigger the hangover. Those of you who've partied before know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well said, well said.
And we had a big party last year, let's just be honest. And those of you who are late to the party, your hangover is not that bad, right?
So you're thinking like 6 to 12 months for the people that want to party again? That's when it's time to get
It depends.
the crypto on?
It depends. I would say if we go sideways on Bitcoin in particular, and Bitcoin is because it's kind of the backbone of the crypto industry from a value perspective. If Bitcoin stays above 6,000 for the next 6 months, it's going to be a short sort of recovery. We'll be back up before the end of next year and hopefully pushing new highs in crypto. If Bitcoin drops to 3,000, it's going to be a winter. It's going to be cold and it's going to be scary.
All right, since we're talking about pricing of Bitcoin, where do you think the price of Bitcoin is going to be in, say, 12 months, 24 months?
I mean, what, I look like an oracle? I mean, I don't know.
They do call you the Bitcoin Oracle, right?
Every prediction you make is percentage based. If you think about it, it's all probabilistic. Like I could say, and then it's a best guess probabilistic because there's no real numbers you can add up and say, well, based upon all these factors and variables, Bitcoin will be 5,325 in 6 months. You can't do that. I would say on a best guess estimate, I'd say at this point it's a 50-50, literally, whether Bitcoin goes down to 3,000 to 4,000 range or not. And it's literally a coin toss. Nobody knows.
Okay. All right, and then as far as Ethereum, we talked a little bit about, its problems of scaling and speed and all that kind of stuff. What do you think is going to end up replacing Ethereum? What do you think people are going to end up building on? Do you think they're just going to get better, or do you think something is going to come up and maybe take over?
So if you apply the analogies to startups and other parts of technology in the world, the problem with horizontal platforms like Ethereum, and I say horizontal, it's kind of multi-purpose. It's like Windows, right? You can do a lot with it. They want to be the world's supercomputer. It's always difficult to compete on you can't wage a war on every front. I mean, Apple, for example, famous for, the Mac OS is a great operating system, but like, let's be honest, they've never beaten Excel, which runs on Windows, and with their Numbers product. It's just not the same. So it's really hard to fight a war on that many fronts, especially in the type of open source community we have right now, where I don't think the product development skills are homogenous across the ecosystem. There are different areas where people are better at certain products than others. So I think Ethereum should probably win in the ICO realm. Maybe it could also flip over. The token curated registries and ERC 721 standard could take off as well. But there are other areas where they may fail. So they may fail on scaling. You may look at there are projects out there which I think are a lot more promising than Ethereum on scaling, but then they have to make trade-offs around centralization. So look at EOS, right? EOS is more centralized, but it's got way better scaling potential than Ethereum. And quite frankly, if you look at the centralization of EOS, it's not that bad. It's not like you're trying to build, like for Bitcoin, I get why the decentralization needs to be to the nth degree. I don't agree with it necessarily to the nth degree, and everyone in the world needs to run a node, but you need to have it decentralized so that no government can attack the system. With EOS, the types of application and programs you want to run, at least for commercial and enterprise usage, doesn't need that level of censorship resistance. So it can be a bit more centralized. I think some of the systems I'm looking at, things like Solana, which is really interesting, their node base would be about 15,000 nodes, which I think is more than sufficient for a decentralized smart contracting type of platform. And their TPS is really high. And so these are things that I think are interesting. Look, there's no answer. There's no sort of, there's no sort of scripture, piece of text that's going to say this is the chosen one. Some people believe they are, but I'm not the religious type. And I think it's just all about experimentation. And based upon the experimentation and the outputs that we get, we can make better decisions going forward. But I think it's amazing that in the past year, we've basically created this entire ecosystem, 4,000 or 5,000 projects. It's the biggest experimentation on a grand global scale in the history of mankind. Like never before have so many people been involved in the technology industry running a series of experiments with total disregard for profitability and revenue and income. Now there's second order effects to that, but just think about it this way, like it's kind of unbridled technology and innovation. It won't last long, but while we're figuring this out, let's hope a couple of winners come out of it.
Awesome. And since, we're kind of on the topic of centralization, decentralization, a lot of people, they don't understand blockchain, right? They don't understand crypto. I've always thought that you need to have some kind of platform, some kind of, software, something that people use like Facebook that they're able to use and not know that it's blockchain, right? For it actually to take off and be mass adopted. But as far as like the decentralization and centralization, how important do you think that is? Because you got companies like Google that's like super centralized that used to say do no evil in their mission statement, and now it's disappeared. And then you got companies like EOS that's all over the papers today with collusion with Huobi. So is there, I guess, what is your thoughts on centralization versus decentralization? Do you think we need a mixture of both, one or the other? What's going to work in the end?
I personally think that, I mean, we can talk about, like, for example, Bitcoin centralization. I don't see the need for more than a couple of 100,000 nodes, as Satoshi put out in the white paper. Like a few 100,000 nodes worldwide would give Bitcoin sufficient decentralization that no government in the world could attack it. I think other people disagree with me on that. They think that you should have a situation where anyone in the world can run a node. And when we have this debate and discussion, the counter argument I have is that the first 50 million people are the early adopters and reasonably tech savvy, and they're the ones using Bitcoin today. Out of 50 million people, barely 10,000 are running a node. Why do we think those numbers will improve as we scale this thing up 100x? It's not. So then we're engineering a system that can support millions and billions of nodes in theory, which I don't agree with. So I'm more of a moderate. I think that it's horses for courses type of approach. What is a sufficient number that would lead to a point that we don't need to worry about how centralized or decentralized the system is, and depending on what the application is, what is that number? So in the case of global money supply, I kind of think, at the upper end, 100 or 200,000 nodes worldwide would give us sufficient decentralization for a currency. That's my personal take. I don't think we need millions, and there may be more conservative people out there who think that you probably need 50,000, 20,000. When you look at applications like, applications and dApps running on things like EOS, 500,000, 2,000 nodes should be enough. So it depends on what you're doing with the applications. Now, if you want to go run a, illicit underground drug smuggling, application, you probably need about 1 billion nodes, because otherwise the government's going to be after you in every which way, and you need to have more censorship on that. So it depends what you're trying to do with it. But for commercial usage, those of you who run applications running on Amazon, that's kind of centralized. Everything runs on Amazon. We have a couple of zones worldwide, and that's about it. We're happy with 10, 20 zones or whatever it is worldwide, and in data centers, and we run our businesses, and literally multi-billion-dollar businesses run on these nodes, because you're conducting business, you're not doing anything illegal, and there's redundancy across these nodes and zones, and you kind of trust Amazon. So the real question is, based upon what you're doing, whether you need a trusted third party or not. And I think some people become overly zealous about their approach to decentralization versus centralization.
Gotcha. And so what projects out there do you think are really doing it right? Like which, if you could name one, like you're like, I like this model, it's a little bit different. EOS has got 21 delegates or something, it could be manipulated, but this one over here is doing really, really well. You got one like that in mind?
I mentioned Solana, that's my favorite. Disclosure, we invested through Multicoin in them. I like the 15,000 node limit. I do like EOS. I think EOS is interesting. That's one way I think is, again, it's a good experimentation of how with a smaller sort of more centralized service, whether it's something that the market wants. At the end of the day, as technologists, our job is to build products for markets. Building technology for the sake of nothingness makes no sense. You've got to build it for someone who wants it. And there seems to be sufficient demand for a more centralized service than Ethereum, like EOS, that scales better than Ethereum does, because it doesn't have to deal with the decentralization vector.
Gotcha. And then, you're a super successful business guy, right? So you've been, on Dragon's Den as one of the dragons, Shark's Tank, as one of the sharks. When I go to these conferences, a lot of the times I see mostly, ICOs that are in attendance. They're trying to raise money, they're trying to, pitch their product, they're trying to do something like that. So with your investment background, with the projects you've invested in, the stuff that you've looked at, maybe, what do you look for in one of those investments that could kind of help these ICOs, know what to do to attract people like yourself to invest in them?
Yeah, look, as an experienced investor, I think one of the things which really sort of gets me excited or unexcited about a company is the team. I think it's always about who are the people you're investing in, and then what are their values. Because people don't appreciate, when you have a global market like this, everyone's raised in different parts of the world. I'm raised in South Africa. I come from a reasonably conservative values perspective. If those of you who've dealt with South Africans know that it's, we're very much about corporate governance and and financial statements and accounting and accountability and all these things, and reputation is important. Now, obviously, there's bad apples everywhere, but by and large, the South African business community is an exceptionally conservative community, and I've got some of that in me today. So when I meet people who, and someone who's done multiple startups, like all my startups have always been kind of bootstrapped to a point. Like I remember the one startup we were raising money, and instead of buying desks and expensive chairs, we took wooden planks and we planked them across onto the wall to create desks for ourselves to save money. So we've always been very conservative with expenditure as a company. Travel, we fly economy, we share rooms, those sorts of things. Right now, as you get big as a company, you can do away with some of those things. But how you spend the money as an entrepreneur is how is assigned to investors of how important, how much you take accountability, how close it is to your heart, so to speak. My concern right now in the ICO world today is the money is so flush, and there are so many inexperienced people from so many different cultures around the world where accountability to investors is just not one of the values they hold. And so when I evaluate an investment opportunity, I try to figure out whether there's a values match. Is this person going to start flying first class around the world and staying in $1,000 night hotels, or are they going to bootstrap and make sure the money goes fast? And as investors invest in lots of companies, I can tell you now the companies I've seen succeed the most out of my portfolio are the ones with the CEOs who are really conservative about how they spend money because they value the equity in their company. When you're spending $1,000 on a hotel room, that's $1,000 worth of equity that you sold. So you're basically selling you're spending your equity on a hotel room. With ICOs, there's no equity. It's basically tokens. So it's kind of easy money at this point because there's a whole bunch of things we haven't resolved in the industry yet. So I get a little more sensitive about those sorts of things. And I'm overly sensitive about it because I have exposure to, I'm well connected in the industry. I know lots of people. I see lots, I get access to the rumor mill. And Instagram is a really good place to go to follow the CEOs of companies you're thinking of investing in and seeing what they do with the money. And when you start seeing guys in private jets running ICO companies and parties overnight and the Instagram stories and stuff, those are the ones you should not be buying tokens in, just by the way. And it's kind of funny that it's kind of very blatant how they just post the stuff on Instagram, what they're up to, where they're going. And the ones that are on the road all the time, literally getting conferences, like who's doing work? Who's actually running the shop? So that's what I look at, like the culture of the company and the culture of the team. And one thing I've learned in business is the fish rots from the head. So if the leader is a bad leader and the leader is extravagant and wants to spend money and is spendthrift and doesn't think about how to manage costs and stretch investor money out, you're going to be one of the people losing money because you're giving it to people who just don't care about your money. And so I'm lucky to be an investor and an entrepreneur. I've seen both sides of the story, and I'm more on the conservative side, but it's worked for me so far.
Awesome. But with Civic, right? We haven't really spoke about that. We really haven't had time. But obviously, identity and personal protection is very important to you. Who would be like Civic's dream partner? And then people can obviously look up Civic if they don't know what it is. But who would be like your dream partner that you could pick?
United States government. I mean, can you imagine? We wouldn't have any election fraud issues ever. If we could, like the whole point about Civic is if we can give everyone in the world their own digital ID on their device, verifiable on the blockchain, making sure that every vote someone casts in an election is a unique vote, and you can tabulate these things in real time. No like double counting, no having to check whether the token's in the right place or there's a double spend or anything like that. You can actually solve election fraud. You can solve governance. There's a lot of things you could solve. It starts with identity and giving everyone a unique digital identity, which is trusted, private, secure, and decentralized. And then you can do a lot more with that in the world.
All right. And then kind of a personal question here. So, everybody's got a bucket list of sorts, right? So what's one thing that's on your bucket list you haven't done yet?
Wow. Skydiving. I'm quite keen on that idea, but I'm kind of scared as well, so I haven't done it yet.
No skydiving. Right on, man. Well, it's been a pleasure, speaking with you and learning your thoughts. And thanks a bunch, everybody, for having me.